I mean, and you know what? I mean, I can't afford to be honest, I just can't afford to be too, you know, self-congratulatory either. I mean, I think back to that we've just had the referendum on abortion, on the Eighth Amendment, and back in the day I didn't campaign for it for that referendum, but I have to admit that I voted in favour of it back then because we didn't actually have any statute-based law at all, and I thought, well, here's an opportunity at least to have it clarified that we do have a law. It's very limited, provides for very limited abortion, very limited, you know, where a woman's life is in danger. But I thought it was important to at least have it written. I now realise, of course, that in the writing of that, and as it subsequently turned out, I mean, Savita Halvan died, and her baby died. Because of a tightly, among other reasons, but you know, read the report. The report implicates the Eighth Amendment, and it came between me and my, you know, as somebody who had met Savita and just thought she was pure wonderful. It just came between me and my peace of mind. That because we are the people who create the laws, you know, who create the government that creates the laws, that creates the constitutional provisions. We have to give those who have to operate those laws, we have to give them clear-sighted ways of dealing with these issues.
Did you say that you met Savita?
Oh, I did. I met Savita, yes. I did.
In what context?
Oh, in the context of when she was helping to organise an event for students at the RCSI way back. And it was a bunch of, she was a young dental student. I think she might have been actually a qualified dentist at the time. She either qualified or dental student. But anyway, she introduced herself to me as a dental person because she knew that I, unfortunately, am surrounded by dentists. And so that was and she was dressed in the most beautiful Indian costume. She was a beautiful girl.
So
and it's just
that clearly affected you.
Oh yeah, well I mean I have a daughter around the same age, you know, who's had 2 babies, and you like to think if your daughter's pregnant that all will go well, and that you know, that you're not going to follow a coffin, 2 coffins, a little baby and her. And anyway, the upshot is that I voted yes this time around with a heart and a half, and so that's why I say, I mean, I'm a person who, you know, would have over time would have always regarded myself as somebody who would have valued the life of both the mother, and also the life of the little baby. But I had no hesitation, you know, at the end of the day, when it came to the vote, it had to be done.
You voted yes?
I absolutely voted yes. Yeah.
Did you go to confession afterwards?
Not yet. And I have no intention whatsoever of doing so, and I'll tell you why. It's a very simple thing. This is one of the areas that our church has really not come to terms with. You see, this business of, you know, telling people that they must go to confession in the circumstance of voting yes if they intended that abortion would be the outcome. These are man-made rules, right? These are man-made rules. These are not statements of an infallible church. These are man-made rules. And what they say about us is that those of us who were recruited into the church as 2-week-old, non-sentient, non-sui campus babies, and who on that day when we became Christians through baptism, we also became members for life of the Catholic Church. And never again would we be asked, when we are sui campus, when we've got all our, you know, all our comprehension skills, we're never going to be asked again to commit to that church. But from baptism, the expectation of our church is that we will now be obedient to the magisterium. Even if we disagree with it, we will be obedient to it. Well, times have changed, and one of the things that has changed is our understanding of our human rights. Among those human rights, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, freedom of religion, freedom to change religion. Within the Catholic Church, none of those fundamental freedoms are available fully to church members according to canon law. But we know in Ireland, from the referendum on LGBTI, on same-sex marriage, we know from the referendum on abortion, that the ordinary people who were baptized into that church and who are subject to the rules of that church, the canon rules of that church, are saying, actually, our human rights transcend and trump your narrowing of those rights in canon law. And this is something that our church has never really come to terms with yet. This is the impact of human rights on the rights of members as set out in canon law, which are very, very narrow and very circumscribed, and flatter, of course, the magisterium and flatter the controlling by the curia. But people now they exercise their right to walk away, to change religion, to have opinions within the church that are at odds with the magisterium, and to say to anybody who will talk about, for example, someone who might have voted yes, saying to them that that has the capacity, depending on what you were thinking, to be a mortal sin, people will say, well, actually, do you see that? I think that my freedom of conscience trumps your idea of what is a mortal sin.
But Mary, aren't we in a very strange situation in the Catholic Church at the moment, where the people on the ground, the committed Catholics, are going one way, and then you've got this curia and the magisterium standing forth. There's a mutiny going on the ground, and the command and control centre are remaining the same. How long more can that continue without something giving? Well,
we had a conference on more or less just this question a few weeks ago. Columba organised a conference, and the title of the conference was 5 Years to Save the Irish Church. And the contribution that I made at the conference was pretty much what I've just been saying now, that the church is an extraordinary institution. And let me just say, absolutely, I love it in so many ways. I really do. It's my cultural hinterland. It's what introduced me to the idea of Christ, to the idea that God intervened in the world to put his Son on this earth to teach us, and to tell us that there's a way of resolving all the messes we create humanly, and that we do that through love, and we do it through forgiveness, and we do it through prayer, and we do it with his help and with his grace. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So I'm really grateful that I got that, because that gives me a context for my life and my being that I love that. The layers that have accreted in the church, since then, not so happy with some of them. And so I look now at the contribution the church makes across the world. Catholics are 1.2 billion people in the world. We are the biggest cohort of Christians in the world. Biggest 200,000 schools across 5 continents, teaching 60 million children. Whoa, what influence. No other NGO does this in the entire world. No other body in the world has this phenomenal influence. And so, if the influence can be used, as it has been traditionally, to embed misogyny, to embed homophobia, it can also be used to unembed them. It can also be used to infuse that gospel of love through those man-made toxins and to reverse the process. And I think that if it did that, we would actually we'd begin to see the power of Christ at work in the world.
And it looks like that the move for that to happen is going to come from the ground. It's going to come from ordinary Catholics.
Yeah. I honestly don't believe that Christ created bishops and cardinals. I know for sure he didn't create cardinals, because I could see where they came from. But okay, fair enough. I'll give him the College of Bishops claims divine origin. I'm not going to contradict them. The College of Cardinals cannot do the same, fortunately. And but what I'm looking at now is a church of very many faces across the world. The old church, which would incorporate Ireland, we're Christianized, since the 5th century, since Patrick and those before Patrick, and so we are a deeply experienced culture in dealing with the Christian faith. And not all countries are. There are cultures that are only coming to the faith now in Africa, in Asia, and other parts of the world. So you have new church and you have old church. The old church is by far the most problematic, because it's in the old church that people are walking away, that people are expressing doubt, frustration, anger, and all of the rest of it. Why is that? Well, in some ways, it's also because people now understand that if you are baptized at the age of a month or a year, or before you know what baptism entails, you're perfectly entitled at any time subsequently to say, actually, do you see the membership that was conferred, the denominational membership that was conferred, what I might call the non-indelible part of baptism, because we were always taught that baptism had theological consequences, some of which are indelible. You know, the mark of Christ is upon us. We are members of the Christi Fideles. And everybody, whether they're Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, Church of Ireland, their baptism gives them that indelible mark of Christ, Christi Fideles. But it also, in the case of Catholics, makes you a member of the church, a member with rights and a member with obligations. Now, you cannot impose obligations. Essentially, it's like a contract. You can't say to a 2-week-old baby, you know, here's your rights and here's your obligations. It's meaningless. Parents have the right to have their children baptized. They have the right to raise their children in the faith. They have the right to guide their children, and they have the right to direct them. They don't have the right to impose upon them a faith that will carry them through to death. They don't have that right. I mean, I think that has even been said by members of the Holy See delegation speaking to the Committee on the Rights of the Child.
Would you be in favour of adult baptism, is it?
No, not even. I mean, I'm perfectly happy with baptism at 2 weeks old. What I'm not happy with is insistence on church membership at 2 weeks old or a month or a year old, and insisting that there is no subsequent time or opportunity when you would confirm that, when you would accept that, when you would validate it or reject it. Some people think confirmation does that. That is not what confirmation does. That is not the theology of confirmation. So our church has never come to terms with the fact that over 80% of all Catholics in the world were recruited into the church when they were non-sentient. You know, when their parents were saying, please don't wake up, please don't cry, you know, please don't ruin the ceremony. When they were either fast asleep or in their prams or, you know, in gowns, you know, that size. That's a simple fact that the church now has to deal with. The other thing that it really has to come to terms with is the implication for the rights of people who are members of the church, the rights and the obligations of people who are members of the church, the implications of human rights law, the implications of our human rights for the way in which the church narrows our rights and says, you must be obedient to the magisterium. Yeah, I think if I was a 21-year-old who joined the church, you know, from another denomination or from agnosticism, and who signed up for that, that would be okay. You know, I'd say that's fine. I understand that's the rule, and I'm prepared to accept it. But to be told at the age from, you know, when you're in school, in Catholic school or catechetics, whatever, to be told you must believe. You're not being invited to believe that because you were baptized at 2 weeks old made you a conscript, and there's no longer an invitation to believe. You must believe the following. You must obey the following, even though you look at what they're saying and you say, I can't believe that. Mary, I find that lacking in credibility.
Just coming back to the Irish church, when you look at the Irish bishops as a group, how do you rate their performance?
I think I wouldn't like to rate them as a group. I don't think that would be fair to them. I think that among them there are people whose views I really, really admire, and whose, for whom I have a lot of time. And then there are others who I think, you know, are more problematic in the way in which they both explain church membership and the obligations of church membership. And I think sometimes they do probably more harm than good to the church. But there are some really wonderful. I mean, there are some really good, wonderful bishops. I mentioned one of them earlier. I mentioned two of them, actually. I mentioned Brendan Leahy, who I think is absolutely excellent. And funnily enough, it's no accident. It's no accident. You know, Brendan is a civil lawyer as well as a canon lawyer and a theologian. He's a lot of things put together. He has said some extraordinary things about confirmation, for example, making the point that sacraments, the reception of sacraments for children, for young people, those under 18, is almost like a conveyor belt. You know, and you know, you do it because you're supposed to do it at 8 years of age, or you're confirmed at 12 because you're supposed to be confirmed at 12. And he's saying, you know, where's the richness of the personal conviction, the richness of the personal commitment? You know, and he has suggested postponing it maybe until age 18 and offering it by way of invitation. And I think that's the beginning. That's the beginning of the kind of discourse the church needs to have. And I'm very glad that we have a bishop among our cohort of bishops who has the training and the education and the insight and the experience, pastoral experience, to know that that's a journey we need to go now before we're left behind.